After a fierce gunfight in the Texas frontier, a wounded cowboy stumbles to the nearest homestead. Catherine Morris, the town's healer, finds him collapsed on her doorstep. Without hesitation, she brings him inside and tends to his wounds, determined not to lose another soul to the harshness of the West. But this injured man holds a secret that could change everything. He's William Hayes, the wealthiest man in America, who left behind his fortune to escape the golden cage of high society. As she nurses him back to health, neither realizes that fate has just dealt them a hand that will challenge everything they believe about wealth, worth, and the true meaning of belonging. Can love survive when the richest man in America falls? For the woman who saved his life without knowing his true identity. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Catherine's hands moved with practiced efficiency as she reached for her worn leather medicine bag, its surface scarred from years of urgent house calls. The bag had been a gift from her father, who taught her everything she knew about healing, before consumption took him 3 winters ago. Inside lay an odd marriage of Western medicine and native remedies, glass bottles of laudanum alongside pouches of willow bark, steel surgical tools next to carefully dried herbs from the Cherokee. Medicine woman who'd become her second teacher. The stranger on her table hadn't stirred since she'd managed to drag him inside. Blood matted his dark hair, and his shirt was soaked crimson from a bullet wound in his shoulder. His clothes were trail-worn but well-made, unusual for these parts. Even unconscious, there was something about him that didn't quite fit the usual cowboy mold. "Hold on, stranger," she murmured, cutting away his shirt with steady hands. "You didn't make it this far to die on my table." The wound was clean, through and through. Catherine had seen enough gunshot wounds in her 6 years as the town's healer to know this one, while serious, wasn't likely fatal if treated properly. She cleaned it with carbolic acid, her movements gentle but sure. The man groaned, his eyes fluttering open. They were startlingly blue against his sun-darkened face. "Where? Safe," Catherine answered, pressing him back down as he tried. To rise, "You're at my homestead, about 10 miles outside of Copper Creek. I'm Catherine Morris, the local healer. You've been shot, but you'll live, provided you stay still and let me work." His eyes focused on her face, sharp despite the pain. There was an intelligence there that caught her attention, an alertness that seemed at odds with his rough appearance. "William," he managed. "William Smith." The hesitation before his surname was slight, but noticeable. Catherine had treated enough men with something to hide to recognize when someone was being selective with the truth. Out here, though, a man's past was his own business, at least until it caused trouble. "Well, Mr. Smith, you're lucky that bullet missed anything vital. I need to clean and stitch this wound. It's going to hurt." She reached for her medicine bag again. "I have laudanum if you want it." He shook his head, jaw set. "Just do what needs doing." Catherine nodded, respecting his choice. She'd seen how that particular medicine could grip a man's soul, and some preferred clean pain to the risk. As she threaded her needle, she studied his face. Despite the trail dust and blood, his features were refined. His hands, though calloused, showed none of the deep-set dirt common to men who work the land. Everything about him was a contradiction. The needle-pierced skin, and William hissed but didn't flinch. Catherine worked quickly, her stitches small and even. "You want to tell me what happened out there?" "Disagreement over cards." His voice was tight with pain. "Some men don't lose gracefully." It was a plausible enough story. She'd patched up plenty of men after card games gone wrong. But something in his tone rang false, like an actor reciting lines he'd rehearsed. "Must have been quite a pot," she commented, tying off another stitch. "Those men used good ammunition, not the cheap stuff you usually see in card game shootouts." William's eyes met hers briefly, a flicker of respect crossing his features. "You know your bullets. They know the wounds they leave." She finished the last stitch and reached for clean bandages. "Just like I know you're not telling me the whole truth. Out here, Mr. Smith, a lie can get a person killed just as surely as a bullet." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, wariness, perhaps, or surprise at being read so easily. Sometimes the truth is more dangerous than a lie. Catherine began wrapping his shoulder, her touch professional, but gentle. And sometimes keeping secrets makes them fester worse than wounds. But that's your choice to make. My job is to heal the body. What you do with your second chance is your business. As she worked, the morning sun crept higher, streaming through her cabin's windows. The light caught the silver threads in her dark hair, earned more from experience than age. At 32, Catherine had seen enough of life's hardships to know that everyone carried wounds deeper than the flesh. She secured the bandage and stepped back, wiping her hands on her apron. "You'll need to rest for at least a few days. No riding, no fighting, and definitely no more card games. I have a spare. Room where you can recover. I can't impose. You can and you will." Her tone brooked no argument. "Unless you'd prefer to try your luck with the men who shot you. I imagine they're still out there, and you're in no condition for another confrontation." William's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Are you always this forceful with your patients?" "Only the stubborn ones." She began packing away her supplies, each item returning to its proper place in the medicine bag. "Rest now. We can discuss terms of payment when you're stronger." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Thank you, Miss Morris. Not everyone would help a stranger without asking questions first." Catherine paused in the doorway, studying him. "Out here, Mr. Smith, we're all strangers, until we prove otherwise. It's what we prove that matters." Night fell over the Texas plains, bringing with it a fever that gripped William in its merciless hands. Catherine sat beside his bed, replacing the cool cloths on his forehead as he tossed and turned, his dreams spilling out in fragments of delirium. "The board meeting. Must attend. Father, please." His refined accent slipped through, nothing like the casual drawl he'd affected earlier. "The merger. Millions at stake." Catherine's hands stilled as she wrung out another cloth. This was no ordinary cowboy's fever talk. She treated plenty of ranch hands and drifters. Their dreams were of cattle drives and card games, not board meetings and mergers. A knock at the door startled her. At this hour, it could only be trouble. She grabbed her father's old shotgun from beside the door before opening it. Young Tommy from the telegraph office stood on her porch, shifting nervously. "Sorry to disturb. You so late, Miss Morris, but this came marked urgent." He thrust a telegram toward her. "For a William Smith. Man in town said he might be out this way." Catherine's suspicion flared. "Who asked?" "Fancy fellow from back east. Wearing one of them derby hats. Said it was important business." She took the telegram, pressed a coin into Tommy's hand. "You didn't see anyone out here, understood?" The boy nodded and scampered off into the darkness. Catherine closed the door, turning the telegram over in her hands. The paper was thick, expensive, not the usual cheap stock used for local messages. Behind her, William moaned in his fever dreams. "The foundations my father built. Can't let it crumble." Catherine broke the seal and unfolded the message. The text was oddly formatted, words arranged in an unnatural pattern. "Urgent stop board meeting. Proceeds without heir. Stop fortune at risk. Stop father gravely ill. Stop return immediately or lose. All stop encoded as agreed. Stop JP Morgan office NYC. Stop." She read it 3 times, pieces clicking into place. The man in her spare room wasn't just hiding something, he was hiding everything. A wealthy heir, running from his responsibilities, from a life she could barely imagine. William's voice cut through her thoughts, clearer now. "Catherine?" She tucked the telegram into her apron pocket and returned to his bedside. His eyes were open, fever bright, but lucid. "How long?" "Hours." She pressed a fresh cloth to his forehead. "Your fever's breaking." He caught her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "Did anyone come?" "Rest," she said firmly. deliberately avoiding the question. "You're not well yet." His eyes searched her face, and for a moment she thought he might press further. But the fever still had him in its grip, and consciousness was a fragile thing. His hand slipped from her wrist as he drifted back into uneasy sleep. Catherine sat back in her chair, studying his face. In sleep, the careful mask he wore slipped away. She could see it now, the subtle signs of breeding, of a life lived, far from dusty trails and humble cabins. Even his calluses were too new, like a man playing at being someone else. She pulled out the telegram again, reading it one more time before making her decision. Crossing to the fireplace, she fed the paper to the flames, watching as the expensive stock curled and blackened. Whatever he was running from, whatever destiny he was trying to escape, that was his business. Her job was to heal, not to judge. But as she returned to her vigil, a new worry gnawed at her. Men of wealth and power didn't vanish without consequences. Sooner or later, his past would catch up with him, and when it did, she had a feeling her quiet life would be caught in the crossfire. Outside, a coyote called into the night, its cry echoing across the empty plains. Catherine settled deeper into her chair, shotgun across her lap, and prepared for a long night of watching and wondering about the mysteries that fate had delivered to her door. Morning light found Catherine at her worn oak desk, carefully recording the night's events in her leather-bound journal. Each page held detailed observations of treatments and outcomes, a medical legacy started by her father and continued through her own practice. Her precise handwriting filled the pages with both scientific observations and traditional wisdom. Patient W.S., gunshot wound to right shoulder, through and through, night fever broke by dawn. Traditional willow bark tea administered alongside standard treatments. Cherokee poultice shows promise in preventing infection. She paused, quill hovering over the page. How much of what she'd learned should she record? The telegram's revelations remained unwritten. Some secrets weren't hers to keep in ink. "You keep detailed records." Catherine started at William's voice. He stood in the doorway, pale but steady, shirt draped loosely over his bandaged shoulder. The fevered confusion of the night was gone from his eyes, replaced by sharp intelligence. "A knowledge saved is lives saved," she replied, closing the journal. "You should be resting." "I've rested enough." He moved into the room with careful grace, studying the shelves of dried herbs and medical texts. "Your practice, it's not exactly standard medical doctrine. Out here, we use what works." She watched him examine a jar of Cherokee healing herbs. Traditional medicine, native remedies. Saving lives matters more than where the knowledge comes from. Unconventional thinking. His fingers traced the Latin names she'd carefully written on each label. "But effective, clearly. Says the man who should be bedridden, but is instead critiquing my methods." There was a hint of amusement in her voice. "Would you prefer I had followed proper Boston medical procedures only?" A shadow crossed his face at the mention of Boston. "You've studied there." "My father trained there before coming west. He believed in learning everything, not just what was fashionable in Eastern circles." She stood, moving to check his bandages. "Something tells me you're familiar with those circles." His muscles tensed under her touch, but he didn't pull away. "What makes you say that?" "Your fever talk was enlightening." She kept her voice neutral as she examined the wound, though I'm sure a simple card game could explain everything. William's silence stretched for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "You don't seem like a woman who enjoys being lied to, and you don't seem like a man who enjoys lying." She stepped back, satisfied with the healing progress. "But we all have our reasons for the paths we choose." He turned to face her fully, searching her expression. "If you've guessed something of who I am, I've guessed you're a man running from something." She moved to her herb shelf, selecting dried leaves for a healing tea. "Beyond that, your business is your own, unless it brings danger to my door. The men who shot me won't be the only ones looking, will they?" Their eyes met in understanding. William moved to help her with the herbs, his hands surprisingly competent as he helped crush the leaves. "You're taking a risk, harboring me." "Life is risk," Catherine replied, adding the herbs to boiling water. My father taught me that along with medicine. He came west with nothing but his medical bag and his dreams of helping people who had no other hope. Conventional wisdom said a proper Boston doctor had no business in frontier medicine. But he proved them wrong. We both did. She poured 2 cups of the fragrant tea. Sometimes the only way forward is to break with what's expected of us, to find our own path. William accepted the cup, his fingers brushing hers. Even if that path leads us far from everything we've known. Especially then. Catherine met his gaze steadily. The question is, what are we running toward, not just what we're running from? The morning light streamed through her windows, catching the glass bottles on her shelves and casting rainbow patterns across the room. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, each contemplating paths chosen and unchosen. Finally, William spoke. Your father would be proud, seeing how you've carried on his work. Combined the best of both worlds. Catherine smiled softly, touching the spine of her medical journal. We all leave some kind of legacy. The trick is making sure it's one worth leaving. His expression grew thoughtful as he sipped the healing. A tea, and she wondered if he was thinking of a very different kind of legacy, one measured in dollars and boardrooms rather than lives saved and knowledge shared. The wanted poster appeared in Copper Creek 3 days later, carried by riders who asked too many questions. Catherine spotted it tacked to the general store's board while picking up supplies. Armed and dangerous. 3 men wanted for attempted murder and robbery. Last seen near Copper Creek territory. $500 reward for information leading to capture. The sketches beneath weren't particularly detailed, but the descriptions caught her eye. Suspects believed to be hired guns from back east. Well-armed, well-funded. Consider extremely dangerous. Quite a sum for regular bandits, old Mr. Henderson commented, coming up beside her. Those fellows asking around town about your patient seem mighty interested in that poster. Catherine's hand tightened on her basket. What fellows? 2 men, dressed city fine despite the dust. Asking if anyone's seen a wounded man, said he's wanted for theft back east. He peered at her knowingly. Told them I hadn't seen anyone special lately. Figured if you're keeping someone hidden up at your place, you've got good reason. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. She pressed a small packet of willow bark into his hands. For your arthritis. Ain't nothing to thank. We take care of our own out. Here. He pocketed the medicine. Better hurry home, though. Those men were mighty interested in which direction your property lay. Catherine kept her pace measured as she left town, but her mind raced. The pieces were fitting together. The quality of ammunition that had wounded William, the telegram, and now hired guns with Eastern connections. Whatever William was running from, it had caught up with them. Her horse's hooves kicked up dust as she urged him faster along the familiar trail. Rounding the last bend before her homestead, she pulled up short. 2 horses were tied to her front rail, fine animals with Eastern saddles. Through her front window, she could see William, standing tensely in her sitting room, facing 2 well-dressed men. Even from outside, she could read the threat in their postures. Catherine slid quietly from her horse, reaching for the rifle she kept mounted on her saddle. The weight of it was familiar in her hands as she moved toward the house. Unpleasant. Business could end here, Mr. Hayes. A cultured voice drifted through the open window. Simply return with us, sign the papers, and this unfortunate episode can be forgotten. And if I refuse? William's voice was cold, nothing like the warm tone she'd grown accustomed to. Then perhaps we discuss this with the local sheriff. A wealthy heir stealing company funds before disappearing. It would make quite a scandal, though I doubt it would reach the papers before. Unfortunate accidents tend to happen in such wild territory. Catherine had heard enough. She pushed open her own front door with the rifle raised. Gentlemen, I believe you're trespassing. The 2 men turned, hands instinctively moving toward hidden weapons. They were mirror images in tailored suits and carefully trimmed beards. The older one smiled thinly. My apologies, madam. We're merely having a business discussion with Mr. Hayes here. In my home, uninvited while armed." She kept the rifle steady. "We have different definitions of business." "Miss Morris," the younger man stepped forward. "This needn't concern you. Mr. Hayes is wanted for nothing that concerns you," William cut in sharply. "The money was mine to take, my inheritance, my right. Your father is using his illness to force my hand." William's voice was tight with anger. "As he's always done." Catherine's finger rested lightly on the trigger. "I don't care about Eastern inheritance squabbles, but I do care about threats made under my roof. Leave, now." The older man's smile vanished. "You're interfering with private business matters, madam. That could be dangerous. More dangerous than a woman who's lived her whole life on the frontier and knows every pressure point and vital organ in the human body." She smiled grimly. "I can demonstrate if you'd like." A tense moment passed. Finally, the older man nodded slightly. "We'll withdraw. For now." He turned to William. "Consider our offer, Mr. Hayes. Family obligations have a way of catching up with us all." Catherine kept the rifle trained on them until they mounted their horses and rode away. Only then did she lower it, turning to William. "Hayes, is it?" He met her eyes steadily. "William Hayes III, of Hayes Banking and Rail. And yes, I took money from the company, my trust fund, which my father is using to try to force me to marry for business connections rather than love." "And the men who shot you?" "Hired by my father's associates, I suspect, to convince me to see reason." His laugh was bitter. "I never expected they'd actually shoot." Catherine set the rifle down carefully. "There's a wanted poster in town for the men who shot you, but I'm guessing there might be another one soon for theft." "Catherine, She held up a hand. "I don't need explanations. I need to know if helping you is going to bring more trouble to my door, and if it is, I need to know if you're worth that trouble." Evening settled over the homestead, bringing with it a hushed quality that made even whispered confessions seem natural. Catherine sat on her porch, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. The day's confrontation had left her with too many thoughts to sleep. A soft melody drifted through her open window, tentative at first, then growing more confident. She followed the sound inside to find William sitting in the gathering darkness, her father's old guitar cradled in his hands. "I hope you don't mind," he said, fingers still moving over the strings. "I noticed it in the corner earlier." "I didn't." "No, it still played?" Catherine moved closer, drawn by the familiar sight of the instrument. "It was my father's. I haven't touched it since he passed." William's hands stilled on the strings. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "No," she said quickly. "It's nice, hearing it again. He used to play every evening, said music was its own kind. Of medicine, a wise man." William shifted, making room for her on the bench. "Would you like to hear more?" Catherine sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of him. "What do wealthy bankers' sons learn to play?" This wealthy banker's son learned whatever would annoy his father most. His smile held a touch of mischief as his fingers found the opening notes of a popular folk song. He wanted classical pieces. "For society parties, I preferred the songs I heard from the stable hands." The melody wrapped around them, simple but beautiful. Catherine found herself humming along, remembering evenings spent just like this, her father playing while she sorted herbs and learned their properties. "Your father," William ventured between verses, "he gave up a lot to come west. A prestigious practice in Boston, social connections, his family's approval." She traced the guitar's worn edges. "But he said, true healing isn't about prestige. It's about being where you're needed most, like father, like daughter." His fingers moved seamlessly into another tune. "You could have a proper practice in any city." "Could, but shouldn't," she smiled softly. "Out here, I can help people who'd never see a doctor otherwise. Use treatments that would scandalize Boston society, but save lives all the same. Breaking with convention seems to run in your family," says the banker playing cowboy songs. Their laughter mingled in the darkness. William's hands stilled again on the strings. "Catherine, about today." Those men will be back, she finished. I know. You could have let them take me. Saved yourself the trouble. Could have, but shouldn't. She echoed her earlier words. Unless you're going to tell me you really did steal that money for selfish reasons. He was quiet for a long moment, the guitar forgotten in his hands. My father is dying. Slowly but certainly. He wants the Hayes legacy secured before he goes, which means merging with another banking family through marriage. The bride's already picked out, the contract's drawn up. All that's missing is my cooperation. And the money? My inheritance. I took it before they could legally bind it to the merger. Enough to start fresh, build something of my own. His voice grew softer. I never expected hired guns, never thought he'd go that far. Money makes people desperate, Catherine observed. So does legacy. Is that what you think I'm running from? Legacy? I think you're running from someone else's version of it. She turned to face him in the darkness. The question is, what's your version? The guitar creaked softly as he set it aside. I used to think I knew. Build something honest, something that helps people instead of just accumulating wealth. But now, his hand found hers in the darkness. Now, I'm not sure of anything except that I don't want to leave here. Catherine's breath caught at the touch, at the weight of words unspoken. William, I know it's impossible. I know those men will come back, that my father won't stop until he gets his way. I know I'm putting you in danger just by staying. His fingers tightened on hers. But for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I should be. The night wrapped around them like a blanket, crickets providing their own melody now that the guitar had fallen silent. Catherine knew she should pull away, protect her heart from what could only end in pain. Instead, she found herself holding on tighter, choosing to trust in something as fragile as hope. The Copper Creek Weekly lay open on every counter in town, its bold headlines impossible to ignore. Eastern banking heir missing, Hayes family offers substantial reward. Below the headline, a photograph showed William in a tailored suit, looking every inch the wealthy banker's son he truly was. Catherine folded the paper quickly, but not before Mrs. Henderson's sharp eyes caught the resemblance. My word, the older woman breathed, glancing between the paper and Catherine. Your patient needs more willow bark, Catherine cut in smoothly, though her heart raced. And perhaps some of your discretion. Mrs. Henderson drew herself up. Catherine Morris, I've kept your secret since you were knee-high to a grasshopper, but this, she lowered her voice. Banking heirs don't just vanish into thin air without reason. No, Catherine agreed quietly, they don't. The general store's bell chimed as more customers entered. Whispers followed Catherine as she gathered her supplies, the newspaper's revelation spreading like wildfire through the small town. Did you see the reward money in our town? All this time, Sheriff Miller caught her arm as she headed in for the door. Miss Morris, a word. She followed him to his office, aware of every eye watching. The sheriff closed the door, his weathered face concerned. You're in a tough spot, Catherine. Am I? He tapped the newspaper on his desk. Man, like that brings trouble. Already had 3 folks ask about the reward money. Won't be long before more come looking. He's my patient, Sheriff, nothing more. That why those fancy-dressed fellows were heading toward your place yesterday. His eyes were kind but serious. Town's grateful for all you do, Catherine. Don't want to see you hurt over some rich man's games. I can handle myself. Like your father could. He softened the words with a gentle smile. He taught you well, but he also taught you to know when you're in over your head. Catherine straightened. Is this official business, Sheriff? Just friendly concern for now, he sighed. But if he's involved in anything illegal, he isn't. The lie came easily, and I'd trust him with my life. The sheriff studied her for a long moment. It's not your life I'm worried about. It's your heart. Catherine left the office with her head high, but his words echoed uncomfortably. The town she'd known all her life suddenly felt different, filled with calculating glances and whispered judgments. Even old friends seemed to look at her differently, measuring their loyalty against the promise of reward money. She found William chopping wood behind her house, the domestic scene at odds with the newspaper's portrait of wealth and privilege. He paused at her approach, reading her expression. "They know," she said simply. He drove the axe into the chopping block. "The paper? Your father works quickly." She handed him the newspaper, watching as he studied his own photograph. "The whole town's talking. Catherine, I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "To what? To drag me into your world? To make me choose between loyalty to you and loyalty to my neighbors?" The words came out sharper than intended. William stepped closer, his voice low. "I'll leave, tonight, before anyone else gets hurt." "And go where? Those men are still watching the roads." She gestured at the newspaper. "Now, everyone for 100 miles will be looking for you. I won't risk your reputation. Your life here." "My life," Catherine said quietly, "changed the moment I found you on my doorstep. Running now won't change that." The evening breeze carried the sound of approaching horses. William tensed, but Catherine recognized the regular hoofbeats of the town doctor's mare. "Doc Sanders," she said, "probably coming to discuss his newest patient. You trust him?" Catherine thought of the gruff old doctor who'd supported her practice when others doubted a woman's skill. "With my life and yours." The horses drew closer. William touched her hand briefly, a gesture of trust and apology combined. "Then I guess it's time to face the music." Together they turned to meet whatever consequences the evening would bring. The town's social was Copper Creek's last normalcy before winter set in, a tradition as old as the settlement itself. Catherine stood before her mirror, fingers tracing the delicate lace of her mother's shawl. The cream-colored silk had yellowed, slightly with age, but the Spanish lacework remained as intricate as the day it had arrived from Madrid, a gift from her father to her mother in more prosperous times. "You don't have to go," William said from the doorway. "Not on my account. If we don't appear, it'll only fuel more gossip." She settled the shawl around her shoulders. "Besides, Doc Sanders thinks showing ourselves openly is wiser than hiding." William moved behind her, their reflections meeting in the mirror. He'd cleaned up well, his borrowed clothes unable to fully disguise the natural elegance of his bearing. "Your mother's?" "One of the few beautiful things she brought west." Catherine touched the shawl's edge. "She said sometimes a woman needs to wear something that reminds her of who she is, not just what life has made her." "Wise woman." "She died when I was 12, summer fever." Catherine turned to face him. The shawl always made her feel like a lady, even when she was up to her elbows in frontier dirt. "And what does it make you feel like?" "Tonight? Like someone who might actually remember how to dance." The town hall was strung with lanterns, fiddle music spilling out into the autumn evening. Heads turned as they entered, conversations stuttering to silence, before resuming with increased intensity. Catherine felt William's hand tighten on her arm. "Quite an entrance," Doc Sanders commented, appearing beside them. "Though I dare say you've given them something new to talk about, Mr. Hayes. Most fugitive bankers don't attend local socials." "Most fugitive bankers don't have such compelling reasons to stay," William replied, his eyes on Catherine. The doctor harumphed. "Well, might as well give them a proper show. Catherine hasn't danced at one of these things since she took over her father's practice." The fiddles struck up a waltz. William turned to Catherine with a formal bow that belonged more in a Boston ballroom than a frontier social. "Miss Morris, would you do me the honor?" She should have refused, should have maintained professional distance. Instead, she found herself taking his hand, letting him lead her onto the floor. His stance and grip were impeccable, nothing like the rough frontier dancing she remembered. "I believe," she murmured as they turned, "your dancing might be giving you away, Mr. Hayes." "Worth it," he replied, guiding her through a graceful spin. "Though I must say, you move more like a society lady than a frontier doctor yourself." "Father insisted we learn. Said healing isn't just about medicine, it's about moving easily in any company." They drew closer with each turn, the rest of the room fading away. Catherine was acutely aware of his hand at her waist, of the warmth, where their bodies nearly touched. Her mother's shawl swirled around them like captured starlight. "They're all watching," she whispered. "Let them." His voice was soft but fierce. "Let them see that I'm not running anymore. Not from my father, not from who I am, and certainly not from how I feel about you." The music swelled, and he drew her into another turn. Catherine caught glimpses of familiar faces, Mrs. Henderson beaming approval, Sheriff Miller looking concerned, Doc Sanders hiding a smile behind his beard. The town's judgment hung in the balance, but in that moment, she found she didn't care. They moved together as if they'd danced 1,000 times before, his sophistication and her grace combining into something that transcended both their worlds. The silk shawl floated around them, a reminder of beauty in unexpected places. As the music drew to a close, William's steps slowed. They stood in the center of the floor, closer than propriety allowed, both breathing quickly from more than just the dance. "Catherine," he started, his voice rough with emotion. A commotion at the door cut him off. The postmaster burst in, waving a telegram. "Sheriff! Riders spotted on the North Road, looking for Hayes." The spell broke. Reality crashed back in. With the force of a prairie thunderstorm, William's arm tightened protectively around her waist as the room erupted in whispers and movement. "Back door!" Doc Sanders appeared beside them. "My carriage is ready." Catherine clutched her mother's shawl closer, suddenly grateful for its reminder of strength in desperate times. One perfect dance. That's all they'd been granted. Now it was time to face what came next. But as they slipped into the darkness, she knew with certainty that she wouldn't change her choice. Some dances were worth any price. Doc Sanders' carriage rattled down the darkened trail toward Catherine's homestead, every bump threatening to dislodge the letter that had fallen from William's coat during their hasty departure. Catherine stared at the expensive paper lying face up on the carriage floor, its corporate letterhead gleaming in the moonlight. Hayes Banking and Rail Corporation, merger agreement. William noticed her gaze. "Catherine." She snatched up the letter before he could stop her, eyes scanning the formal text. "Regarding the proposed merger between Hayes Banking and Rail Corporation and Lancaster Financial Holdings to be facilitated through the marriage of William Hayes III and Miss Eleanor Lancaster, total combined assets estimated at $15 million, conditional upon the return of misappropriated funds totaling $250,000. $250,000. Her voice was barely a whisper. "That's what you took? My trust fund? My money?" William reached for the letter, but she pulled back. "Money you're being hunted for. Money that's brought armed men to my town, endangered my neighbors." The carriage hit another bump, but Catherine barely noticed. "This merger is worth millions. Money I want no part of. Yet you took a fortune before running." The words tasted bitter. "Were you ever going to tell me the whole truth?" Doc Sanders cleared his throat from the driver's seat. "Ridge, ahead. Might want to hold that conversation for safer ground." Catherine folded the letter carefully, tucking it into her dress pocket. The rest of the ride passed in tense silence, broken only by the horses' hooves and the creak of carriage wheels. At her homestead, Doc Sanders helped them inside before taking up watch by the window. "Riders'll have to come by the main road. We'll have warning." Catherine lit a lamp, its glow harsh against the night's shadows. The letter seemed to burn in her pocket, demanding answers. "How much danger are we really in, William?" He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture stripping away his careful composure. "The merger. It's not just about money. Lancaster Holdings is failing. My father's banking empire needs their political connections to survive. Without this marriage, your father's legacy crumbles." She pulled out the letter again. "So you took enough money to ensure your independence, but did you think about what that money might cost others, the bank's depositors, the workers? It's not that simple, isn't it?" Catherine's voice cracked. "My father taught me that healing means doing no harm, but you've brought harm to my door, to my town. And for what? To spite your father. To be free, the words burst from him. To build something honest, something that helps people instead of crushing them under interest rates and foreclosures. To be more than just a pawn in my father's game of empire building. Noble intentions, she said quietly, paid for with other people's futures. William crossed the room, taking her hands in his. The letter crumpled between them. Catherine, everything I've told you about my feelings, about wanting a different life, that's all true, but not the whole truth. She pulled away. You. Let me believe you were running from an unwanted marriage, not from theft charges that could destroy everything I've built here. Would you have helped me if you'd known? That's not fair. She turned to the window, where Doc Sanders still kept watch. I helped you because I believed in you, because I thought you were fighting for something right. I am. His voice was rough with emotion. But I'm not perfect. I'm just a man trying to find his way to something real, something true. He paused. Someone true. Catherine closed her eyes, feeling the weight of choices pressing down. Outside, a coyote called, a lonely sound in the vast night. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. If we survive this night, you need to make this right. Find a way to return the money, face your father, deal with the consequences of your choices. She turned back to him. And if you don't, if you keep running, you'll do it alone. The lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. In the distance, they heard the first sounds of approaching horses. In the tense moments before the riders arrived, William pulled a worn photograph from his inside pocket. The edges were soft from handling, the image showing a younger version of himself standing beside a stern-faced man in an expensive suit. Behind them loomed the imposing facade of Hayes Banking and Rail. The day I became vice president, William said quietly, holding the photograph in the lamplight. Father was so proud, his legacy secured. He traced the edge of the image. Look at my smile, so confident I could change things from the inside. Catherine studied the photograph. The younger William's smile didn't reach his eyes. What changed? I discovered what that legacy really meant. Foreclosing on families during hard times, driving smaller banks out of business, using political connections to crush competition. His hand tightened on the photograph. Father called it progress. I called it corruption. Hoofbeats grew closer. Doc Sanders moved away from the window. Riders coming. At least 6. Back door, Catherine decided, gathering essential supplies. We can cut through the oak grove. No, William set the photograph on the table. No more running. William, you were right. About all of it. He straightened his shoulders, looking more like the banker in the photograph than the cowboy she'd nursed back to health. I have to face this. Make it right. They'll arrest you. Better than watching them destroy everything you've built. Here, he touched her cheek gently. I won't let my pride cost you anything more. The riders were visible now, torches cutting through the darkness. William picked up the photograph one last time, studying his father's face. All my life, I've been fighting against becoming him. Never realized I was becoming something worse, someone who'd risk others to prove a point. Catherine reached for his hand, but the crash of breaking glass interrupted the gesture. A torch sailed through the window, flames catching on her. Curtains! Out, now! Doc Sanders shoved them toward the door as more torches flew in. They emerged into chaos. Masked riders circled the house, more torches flying. Catherine's home, her father's legacy, was already ablaze. Hayes! A voice called from the darkness. Show yourself, thief! William stepped forward into the torchlight. I'm here. Let them go. This is between us. A rider dismounted, one of the men from the earlier confrontation. Oh, it's far too late for that. Your father wants a message sent about consequences. Catherine's medical bag was still in her hands. She reached inside, fingers closing around a bottle. William, when I say run, I won't leave you. Miss Morris, Doc Sanders interrupted quietly. That bottle you're holding better be what? I think it is. She nodded slightly. The ether she used for surgeries was highly flammable, one thrown bottle near their torches. Now! She hurled the bottle high. It shattered near the riders, flames whooshing up in a spectacular burst. Horses reared in panic, riders scattered. William grabbed her hand and they ran, Doc Sanders covering their retreat with his shotgun. Behind them, Catherine's home burned. Against the night sky, the family photograph curling to ash on the table inside. They didn't stop running until they reached the thick grove of oaks. Catherine's herbs, her father's books, her mother's shawl, all gone. She leaned against a tree, chest heaving. "Catherine!" William's voice broke. "I'm so sorry. Your home. Homes can be rebuilt." She straightened, steel in her voice. "But first, we end this. No more running, remember? We. You're not the only one who's lost something to pride." She looked back at the orange glow on the horizon. "Helping you, protecting you. Maybe I was trying to prove something too, that I could handle anything, just like my father." William pulled her close, his heartbeat strong against her cheek. In the distance, they could hear the town's fire bell ringing. "So what now?" he whispered into her hair. "Now?" Catherine pulled back, determination replacing grief. "Now, we stop reacting and start fighting back, but this time we do it right." The Hayes family signet ring felt impossibly heavy in William's hand as he stood before the mirror in his Boston hotel room. The gold gleamed dully, the embossed H worn smooth from generations of wear. His father, grandfather, and great-grandfather had all worn this ring while building their banking empire. Now it represented everything he'd tried to escape. "Your father expects you within the hour," his old valet, Harrison, reminded him quietly. The man had aged in the months since William's departure, new worry lines creasing his forehead. "He's in the main office." William slipped the ring onto his finger, watching it catch the morning light. The fine suit Harrison had brought felt like a costume now, too stiff after months of simple cotton and denim. "How is he, really?" "Worse, sir. The doctors say—" Harrison hesitated. "Winter may be difficult." The ring seemed to tighten around his finger. William had returned to face his father as a man, to make things right. He hadn't expected to be racing against death. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Catherine stood in the doorway, nearly unrecognizable in the fine dress they'd purchased upon arriving in Boston. But her eyes were the same, clear, direct, unafraid. "The carriage is ready," she said. They'd agreed she would wait at the hotel, but now, seeing her, William knew he needed her strength. "Come with me." She crossed the room, taking his ringed hand in hers. The contrast was stark. Her fingers still bore the calluses of frontier work, while his had already begun softening back to a banker's hands. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Your father doesn't know about me. He knows everything by now." William squeezed her hand. "And I'm done hiding what matters to me." The Hayes Banking and Rail Building dominated Boston's financial district, its marble facade gleaming with power and prestige. As their carriage approached, William saw Catherine taking in the sheer scale of his former world. "Different from Copper. Creek's General Store," he said softly. "Different universe entirely." But her voice was steady. "Remember why we're here." The ring caught the light again as William helped her down from the carriage. Yes, he remembered. They had a plan: return the money, negotiate peace, protect Catherine's town from further revenge. Simple in theory, nearly impossible in execution. Inside, the bank's massive lobby fell silent as they crossed the marble floor. Whispers followed them up the grand staircase. "Young Mr. Hayes, the prodigal son. Who's the woman?" William's father's office occupied the entire top floor. A testament to the power of the Hayes name. Outside its carved oak doors, William paused. "Last chance to wait here." Catherine straightened his tie, her touch anchoring him to what was real. "Together. Remember." The office was exactly as he remembered, all dark wood and leather, the huge desk dominating the space like a throne. Behind it, William Hayes the coup looked diminished somehow, illness eating away at his imposing frame, but his eyes were sharp as ever as they took in his son's return. "So," the older man said, "the prodigal returns with a companion." His gaze raked over Catherine dismissively. William's hand tightened around the ring. "This is Catherine Morris, the woman who saved my life when your hired guns nearly took it. Unfortunate business, that." His father waved it away. "But necessary, as you forced my hand. The money, William?" "Being transferred back as we speak, with interest." "Ah," a thin smile. "And now you'll sign the merger agreement? See sense at last?" "No." William stepped forward, Catherine beside him. "I'm here to negotiate new terms, ones that don't involve marriage contracts or political manipulation." His father's laugh was harsh. "You think you have leverage? You're a thief, son, a fugitive. I'm your son, your heir, and I have proof of every illegal dealing this bank has conducted in the past decade." William met his father's stunned gaze. "Did you think I spent all those years as vice president just warming a chair?" The older man's face darkened. "You would destroy your own family's legacy? To save it?" William's ring caught the light as he reached for Catherine's hand. "Yes, because legacy isn't just about money and power. Sometimes it's about healing what's broken, even if that means breaking it completely first." The telegram arrived during their meeting with William's father. "Copper Creek under siege. Stop. Lancaster men burning buildings. Stop. Demanding Hayes return. Stop. Town needs help. Stop." Catherine's hands shook as she read the words. Even from hundreds of miles away, the Lancasters were making good on their threats. Her home had been just the beginning. "You're doing?" William asked his father coldly. The older man's expression remained impassive. "The Lancasters protect their interests, as should you." "Their interests?" Catherine stepped forward, her voice tight with fury. "Those are people's lives you're destroying, my neighbors, my patients. Unfortunate collateral damage in a larger game, my dear." He smiled thinly. "One you chose to involve yourself in." William's fist crashed onto the mahogany desk. "This ends. Now, indeed it does." His father pulled out a stack of papers. "Sign. The merger agreement. Return to your responsibilities. Miss Morris returns to her frontier practice. Everyone goes home happy." "Everyone except Eleanor Lancaster," Catherine noted. "The woman you'd force William to marry. Eleanor understands duty to family. Pity my son never learned the same." William's laugh was bitter. "No, father. I learned too well. I learned how. The Hayes family destroys anything that threatens its power." He turned to Catherine. "We're leaving." "William," his father started. "I'm not signing anything. Instead, I'm going to send copies of every illegal transaction, every bribed official, every foreclosure fraud, to every newspaper from here to San Francisco." William's voice was cold. "Unless you call off the Lancasters. Unless you release me from the merger agreement. Unless you leave Catherine's town, and every small town like it, alone." The older man's face purpled. "You would blackmail your own father?" "I learned from the best." William took Catherine's arm. "You have 1 hour to send that telegram. After that, I start ruining everything you've built." They were halfway to the door when his father's voice stopped them. "The ring!" William looked down at the signet ring still on his finger. Without hesitation, he pulled it off and tossed it onto the desk. "Keep it. I've found something worth more." They rushed from the bank to the telegraph office, sending urgent messages to Doc Sanders and Sheriff Miller. But it would take hours for any response to reach them, hours during which Copper Creek burned. "We have to go back," Catherine said as they returned to their hotel. "Now." "Agreed." William was already packing. "But not alone." "What do you mean?" He smiled grimly. "I wasn't idle during my time as vice president. I made friends among those my father crushed, powerful friends who owe me favors. Friends with guns, friends with badges." He pulled out another telegram. "U.S. Marshals have been building a case against the Lancasters for years. Seems their banking practices make my father look honest." Catherine caught his meaning. "So, while your father's planning to sacrifice them in the merger, they're about to discover just how expendable they are." He touched her cheek. "The Marshals are already heading to Copper Creek. We just need to beat them there." They took the next train west, but the journey felt endless. Every stop Every delay was agony, as Catherine imagined her town under siege. The telegram had mentioned buildings burning. Her clinic, the general store. How many people were hurt while she played politics in Boston? William watched her from across their private compartment. "We'll make it right, will we?" She met his eyes. "Your father, the Lancasters, they see my town as nothing but pieces on a board, acceptable losses in their game of wealth and power. Then we'll show them the pieces can fight back." He took her hand. "Your father taught you that healing isn't just about medicine. Sometimes it's about standing up to the sickness." Catherine squeezed his hand, remembering her burned home, her scattered medicines, her father's books turned to ash. And what if the sickness is too big? What if we're just two people against an empire? Then we build a better empire. William's voice was fierce. One that heals instead of destroys. One that serves instead of rules. He paused. "Together?" Before she could answer, the train whistle pierced the air. Another delay. But this time, through the window, Catherine saw smoke on the horizon. Copper Creek was burning. William wrote his resignation letter by lantern light as their train raced west, his precise handwriting steady despite the rail car's movement. "To the Board of Directors, Hayes Banking and Rail Corporation, we, William Hayes III, hereby tender my immediate and irrevocable resignation from all positions within Hayes Banking and Rail Corporation, including my seat on the Board of Directors and my rights as heir to the Hayes financial empire." Catherine watched him write, noting how each word seemed to lift a weight from his shoulders. The formal language couldn't hide the Declaration of Independence beneath. "You're really doing this," she said softly. He kept writing. "Furthermore, I relinquish all claims to my inheritance and future interests in the corporation, with the following conditions. All actions against the town of Copper Creek and its citizens must cease immediately. The proposed merger with Lancaster Holdings must be terminated. A fund of $1 million must be established for rural medical clinics throughout the Western Territories." $1 million. Catherine's breath caught. "William, a fraction of what the Hayes Empire has taken from towns like yours." He didn't look up from the page. "It's time that money did some actual good." The letter continued, laying out terms that would reshape his father's empire. Programs for fair lending, restrictions on foreclosures, requirements for community investment. Each condition was a brick torn from the wall between wealth and conscience. "Your father won't accept this." "He will." William's pen scratched across the paper. "Because the alternative is watching his legacy crumble under federal investigation. Everything I learned, every corrupt deal and hidden account, it's all documented in a letter to the Treasury Department, to be delivered if these terms aren't met." Outside their window, the landscape blurred past in the darkness. Somewhere ahead, Copper Creek burned, but here, in the quiet of their compartment, William was fighting with his greatest weapon, the truth he'd spent years gathering. He signed the letter with a flourish, then began a second document. "To the United States Marshal Service, I hereby testify to the following crimes committed by Lancaster Holdings." "They'll never forgive you," Catherine said quietly. "Good." He sealed both letters. "I've spent too long seeking forgiveness from the wrong people." The train whistle shrieked, and the conductor called out the next stop. Still hours from Copper Creek, but every mile brought them closer to whatever aftermath awaited them. What if we're too late? The fear Catherine had been holding back crept into her voice. What if there's nothing left to save? William set down his pen and took her hands. "Then we rebuild, not just buildings, but something better, something that stands against men like my father and the Lancasters." "With what?" "They have all the power, all the money. They have paper." He tapped the letters. "We have people. Real people who work and build and heal. That's worth more than all their banknotes and merger agreements." A memory struck Catherine, her father saying something similar when they'd first arrived in Copper Creek. "Money's just paper," he told her. "Trust, respect, community. That's real wealth." The train swayed around a bend, and William steadied her. The lantern light caught his face, showing none of the entitled banker she'd first suspected him of being. Here was a man who'd chosen his path no matter the cost. "I meant what I wrote," he said, "about the medical clinics. Your father's dream of frontier medicine. It shouldn't die because men like my father think profit matters more than people." Catherine touched the letters, feeling the weight of promise in the expensive paper. "You're choosing a side that could cost you everything." "No," he smiled, and for the first time since Boston, it reached his eyes. "I'm choosing the side that showed me what everything really means." The train's rhythm surrounded them. Wheels on rails, steam and steel, driving them forward, like a heartbeat, like destiny, like the pulse of possibility. Whatever waited in Copper Creek, they were no longer just running from something. They were running toward it, together. William gathered the letters, his resignation and testimony, both. "Ready?" Catherine nodded, thinking of home, of healing, of battles worth fighting. "Ready." Dawn broke over Copper Creek as their train pulled into the station. The deed to the Henderson property was clutched in Catherine's hand, a hasty purchase telegraphed ahead by William, ensuring they'd have a place to make their stand. The sea, large plot of land overlooking the town, would give them a clear view of both friend and foe. Smoke still rose from several buildings, but the town wasn't destroyed. If anything, it looked like a fortress. Barricades blocked Main Street. Townspeople stood watch with rifles, and Doc Sanders' clinic had become a makeshift command center. "Hayes!" Sheriff Miller's voice boomed across the platform. "You've got nerve showing your face here." "Sheriff." William stepped forward, hands raised. "We brought help." As if on cue, the second train whistle sounded. U.S. Marshal Davies and his deputies stepped onto the platform, badges gleaming in the morning light. "Sheriff Miller?" Davies nodded. "We have warrants for several members of the Lancaster organization. I believe they've been causing trouble in your town." The sheriff's weathered face broke into a grim smile. "You could say that. They're holed up at the Crystal River Mine, about 3 miles north, been using it as their base to raid us." Catherine unfolded the deed. "Then it's time we gave them a proper welcome. The Henderson property overlooks that mine. Strategic thinking," Davies approved, "but risky. They'll see you coming." "That's the idea." William took the deed, studying the property lines. "They want Hayes, money and power. Let's show them what that really means." The next hours were a blur of activity. Word spread through town that William and Catherine had returned with federal law behind them. Townspeople emerged from their defensive positions, offering help, sharing information about Lancaster movements. Mrs. Henderson brought coffee and biscuits to the clinic where they planned. "Property's yours now," she told Catherine. "But something tells me you're planning more than just a new homestead up there." Catherine smiled, remembering her burned clinic. "Something bigger. Something that serves the whole territory. The deed gives us water rights too," William added, spreading out a map. "Enough to support a proper medical facility, training programs for frontier doctors, everything Catherine's father dreamed of. If we survive the next 24 hours, Marshal Davies reminded them. The deed sat between them on the planning table, more than just paper now. It was possibility, future, hope. "They'll expect us to wait for darkness," the Marshal continued. "To try something subtle. Then we don't." William's voice was firm. "We ride up at high noon, show them exactly who and what they're facing. A banker, a doctor, and some townsfolk?" One of the deputies scoffed. "No," Catherine's voice rang, with authority. "A community. Something they've never understood." The plan came together quickly. The Marshal's men would circle behind the mine, while William and Catherine approached from the Henderson property. The town would provide covering fire if needed. "One thing still bothers me," Sheriff Miller said as they prepared. "Why'd the Lancasters push so hard? Burning buildings, terrorizing folks, seems extreme even for them." William's face darkened. "Because they know they're finished. The merger was their last chance to hide their crimes behind Hayes' money and influence. Without it, they're desperate," Catherine finished, "and we're using that desperation against them." As noon approached, they gathered on the Henderson property. The deed had been safely stored in Catherine's medical bag, a promise of tomorrow in the midst of today's fight. The town spread below them, battered but unbroken. Beyond it, dust rose from the mine road as Lancaster men spotted their approach. Last chance to back down, Marshal Davies offered. Catherine checked her medical supplies, ready for whatever came. This is our home, all of ours. We don't back down from that. William took her hand, and she felt the absence of his family ring, a space now filled with something stronger than gold and tradition. Ready? He asked, not just to her but to everyone gathered. The answering chorus of ready echoed across the property that represented so much more than land. It was their line in the sand, their foundation for the future, their declaration that some things were worth any price. Then let's show them, William said, what real power looks like. Together they began their descent toward the mine, the deed to their future safely stored, while the present demanded their courage, their unity, and their unwavering stand against those who would destroy everything they held dear. The silver-plated pistol in William's hand caught the high noon sun. His father's initials were engraved on the grip, WH2, a graduation gift meant to symbolize the power of the Hayes name. He'd never fired it until today. That's far. Enough, Hayes, a Lancaster man called from the mine entrance. Unless you want more buildings burning. William stepped forward, the pistol lowered but ready. Catherine moved with him, her medical bag at her side. Behind them, Marshal Davies, and his men spread out quietly, using the terrain for cover. It's over, McLean, William called back. The merger's dead. Your boss's crimes are exposed. Federal marshals have the mine surrounded. James McLean emerged from the shadows, elegant suit incongruous against the rugged mine entrance. You stupid boy. You think this is about money? About banking, he sneered. This is about power, the kind your father understood before you betrayed him. My father understood fear, William replied. Mistook it for respect. More men appeared, rifles aimed. Catherine counted 8, all hardened professionals, the kind of men wealthy families kept hidden until dirty work needed doing. Last chance, Hayes, McLean offered. Walk away. Take your doctor friend back east. Live your soft, wealthy life. William's grip tightened on his father's pistol. All his life he'd tried to escape his father's shadow, never realizing he'd been living in it even as he ran. Can't do that, he said, quietly. Then I guess we do this the hard way. McLean raised his hand to signal his men. The first shot came from behind them, Marshal Davies taking out a Lancaster man trying to flank their position. Then all hell broke loose. William pulled Catherine behind a boulder as bullets peppered the ground. His father's pistol barked, twice keeping McLean pinned while the marshals advanced. You know what your father told me about you, Hayes? McLean shouted over the gunfire. Said you were too soft, too concerned with common folk. Said you'd destroy everything he built with your foolish ideals. He was right, William called back. I'm destroying it and building something better. A Lancaster man broke cover, running for better position. Catherine's voice rang out. Will, 10 o'clock. The silver pistol came up smoothly. One shot, and the man fell clutching his shoulder. Non-fatal, but effective, just as Catherine had taught him during their target. Practice. Nice shot, she said, already pulling bandages from her bag. I had a good teacher. He touched her hand briefly. Ready to end this? She nodded, and William stood, his father's pistol held high. McLean, look around you. Your men are down, or surrendering. The marshals have the high ground. It's finished. Nothing's finished. McLean's voice was desperate now. Your father promised us protection, promised us power. My father's promises were worthless, William said clearly, letting his voice carry to all the surviving Lancaster men. Just like his vision of power, but I'm making you a new promise. Surrender now, testify against Lancaster, and you'll get fair treatment. A tense moment passed. Then one by one, rifles clattered to the ground. McLean stood alone, his world crumbling around him. You're just like them, he spat. The common folk, weak, soft. His hand moved like lightning, drawing a hidden pistol. 2 shots rang out as one. McLean's bullet whined past William's ear. His father's pistol kicked in his hand, and McLean fell. Catherine was moving before the echo faded, her doctor's instincts overriding everything else. She reached McLean, hands already working to stem the bleeding. "Why?" McLean gasped as she treated him. "Why help me after everything?" "Because this is what real power looks like," she said firmly. "The power to heal instead of harm." William knelt beside them, his father's pistol now tucked away. The silver plating was smudged with powder burns, the elegant engravings stained with use. Like his father's legacy, its superficial beauty had been stripped away, revealing the tool beneath, one that could destroy or protect, depending on the hands that held it. "He'll live," Catherine announced, finishing the bandage, "though he might wish otherwise when the marshals start their questioning." William helped her up, both of them dirty and powder-stained, but standing tall. Around them, marshals were taking prisoners, treating wounds, restoring order. "Ready to build something new?" he asked softly. Catherine looked over the battlefield. "That would soon become the site of their new clinic." "More than ready!" A week after the shootout, Catherine and William spread the blueprint across a makeshift table in what remained of her clinic. The carefully drawn plans showed something far grander than her original building, a proper frontier hospital rising from the ashes of conflict. "Eastern architecture, Western practicality," William explained, tracing the lines. "Modern surgical facilities here, traditional healing spaces here, room to train new doctors, quarters for patients' families." Catherine studied the details. Large windows for natural light, wide porches for recovering patients, separate wings for different types of care. The blueprint combined everything she and her father had dreamed of with resources they'd never imagined possible. "The town council approved it this morning," William continued, "along with plans to rebuild everything the Lancasters destroyed. The Hayes Foundation's first major project." "The Hayes Foundation?" She looked up sharply. "A new kind of legacy," he smiled. "Using my inheritance to heal the damage banking empires like my father's caused, starting here, then spreading to other frontier towns that need help." Doc Sanders shuffled in, studying the blueprint with knowing eyes. "Mighty ambitious. Your father won't take kindly to his money being used." "This way." "He doesn't have a choice." William's voice was firm. "The evidence I gathered gave us leverage. This foundation was part of the deal to keep the Hayes name out of the papers." Catherine traced the space marked Traditional Medicine Wing, where she would teach other healers the Cherokee remedies that had saved so many lives. "This is really happening. Construction starts next week. We've got crews coming from—" "No," she interrupted. "This, us, everything we talked about during the fighting, building something that matters." William took her hand, his fingers warm and sure against hers. "Every word, every promise." Doc Sanders cleared his throat. "Well, speaking of promises, the town's been talking about you two. Has it now?" Catherine tried to sound unconcerned, but her cheeks warmed. "Seems folks think it ain't proper, you two working so close together without—" He coughed. "Official arrangements. Do they indeed?" William's eyes danced. "And what do you think, Doc?" "I think," the old doctor straightened, "I think Catherine's father would have liked you, son. Once he got past the whole wealthy banker thing." Catherine blinked back sudden tears. Coming from Doc Sanders, who'd been her father's closest friend, it was the highest praise possible. The blueprint crinkled as William rolled it carefully. "Actually, I had plans drawn up for something else too." He produced a second set of drawings. "A house up on the Henderson property, big enough for a family, close enough to the hospital, for emergency calls." Catherine's breath caught as she studied the plans. Like the hospital, it was a perfect blend of worlds, Eastern comfort and Western practicality. A doctor's house, a banker's house, their house. "Only if you want it," William said softly. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Depends. His smile was tender. Are you answering what I think you're answering? Doc Sanders threw up his hands. Lord, save me from young folk who can't speak plain. Catherine Morris, this man's asking you to marry him. William Hayes, she's saying yes. Now can we get back to planning my new operating theatre? They laughed, the sound echoing through the damaged clinic. Outside, hammers rang as townspeople worked to rebuild. Wagons loaded, with construction materials rattled past. The town was healing, growing, becoming something new. You know, Catherine said, studying both blueprints, we're building more than just buildings here. William nodded. A new kind of foundation, one that supports people instead of crushing them. Speaking of support, Doc Sanders interjected, Mrs. Henderson's planning the wedding already. Says if you two think you're doing this without a proper celebration, you've got another think coming. A proper celebration? William raised an eyebrow at Catherine. What do you say, Dr. Morris? Ready to scandalize Boston society by having a frontier wedding? Only if you're ready to scandalize frontier society by bringing Boston manners to it. Deal. He sealed it with a kiss that made Doc Sanders grumble and look away. The blueprints lay forgotten for a moment as they held each other, their dreams taking solid form in ink and paper, in brick and wood, in love and purpose. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, buildings to raise, wounds to heal, bridges to build between worlds that had seemed impossibly far apart. But for now, they stood in the ruins of what had been, holding the plans for what would be, and knew that sometimes the greatest adventures start with a single blueprint and the courage to imagine something new. The wedding quilt grew piece by piece, each square telling its own story. Mrs. Henderson brought the first patch, silk from her own wedding dress. Then came calico from the miners' wives, muslin from the farmers' daughters, even a scrap of fine lace from Doc Sanders's late wife's collection, each piece sewn with care, creating something greater than its parts. Catherine found the women working on it in the church basement, their needle and thread creating art from memory and hope. Mrs. Henderson held up a corner to show her the intricate pattern. Every stitch a blessing, the older woman explained. Every piece a prayer for your future. The center square caught Catherine's eye, her mother's shawl, salvaged from the ashes of her old home, transformed into a sunburst pattern. Surrounding it, the women had sewn images that told their story. A medical bag, a compass, crossed paths, healing herbs, and at the corners, the Hayes banking symbol reimagined as a rising sun. We wanted to show both worlds coming together. Young Mary Thompson explained shyly, like you and Mr. Hayes. Construction on the new clinic continued overhead, the sounds of progress providing rhythm to the women's work. Catherine touched the pieces of her mother's shawl gently. It's perfect, she whispered. Speaking of perfect, Mrs. Henderson said, with a knowing smile, your Boston guests are arriving today. Sure you're ready for that? Catherine smoothed her skirts. New ones, ordered from Boston but styled for frontier practicality. As ready as I'll ever be. The Eastern contingent arrived that afternoon. William's Aunt Elizabeth, his cousin Margaret, and a handful of progressive-minded friends who'd supported his vision for the Hayes Foundation. They brought trunks of fine gifts and barely concealed curiosity about the frontier town that had captured their William's heart. My dear, Aunt Elizabeth said, embracing Catherine warmly, you must tell me everything. How you're planning to combine modern medicine with frontier healing. William says you're revolutionizing rural health care. We're trying, Catherine admitted, leading them through the partially constructed clinic. Traditional wisdom, modern science, and enough space to teach others. Margaret touched the hanging blueprints. Uncle would have apoplexy seeing Hayes' money spent this way. Father's learning to adapt, William said, joining them. Amazing how federal investigations encourage flexibility. The women laughed, and Catherine marveled at how natural it felt. These sophisticated Easterners blending with her frontier world, like the quilt pieces, different but creating something beautiful together. That evening, the town hosted a dinner that would have impressed any Boston society event. Copper Creek's women had outdone themselves, proving that frontier hospitality could match Eastern elegance. The quilting circle unveiled their masterpiece, and Aunt Elizabeth actually cried. "Such artistry," she breathed, touching the detailed stitching. "Such meaning in every piece." "That's Copper Creek," Catherine said proudly. "We build beauty from whatever's at hand." Later, watching William dance with his aunt while Doc Sanders taught Margaret frontier reels, Catherine found herself beside Mrs. Henderson again. "Having second thoughts," the older woman asked kindly, "about joining these two worlds?" Catherine watched William laugh as he stumbled through the unfamiliar steps. "No, just thinking about how sometimes the best medicines are the unexpected ones. Like a banking heir turned frontier doctor's husband? Like a town that takes broken pieces and stitches them into something stronger." The quilt hung in a place of honor, its patterns catching lamplight. Catherine saw her whole life in those squares, past and future, east and west, loss and renewal, each piece carefully chosen, lovingly placed, creating a whole greater than anyone could have planned. William caught her eye across the room and smiled, that private smile that still made her heart skip. He'd loosened his fancy tie, rolled up his sleeves, embraced this world that had given him purpose. Tomorrow they would marry, her in a dress that combined Boston silk with frontier practicality, him in a suit that would never quite hide the cowboy he'd become. They would stand before God and community, two worlds merging as naturally as dawn breaking over the prairie. But tonight, watching her townspeople dance with Boston sophisticates, seeing her mother's shawl transformed into a symbol of new beginnings, Catherine knew they'd already built something remarkable. Like the quilt, like the clinic rising on the hill, like love itself, taking separate pieces and binding them into something stronger, truer, and more beautiful than either could have. Been alone? 1 year later, Catherine's first medical textbook sat fresh from the Boston printers. Frontier Medicine, Combining Traditional Wisdom with Modern Practice by Dr. Catherine Morris Hayes. Its leather binding gleamed in the morning light streaming through the clinic's windows. Inside, careful illustrations showed native herbs alongside surgical techniques, Cherokee healing practices next to the latest medical innovations. William found her in her office, running her fingers over the embossed cover. "The first copies just arrived at Hayes Foundation clinics across the territory," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Doc Sanders says the new students are already fighting over them." What would my father think, she wondered, his frontier medicine dreams published by Boston's finest medical press? He'd be proud. William kissed her temple. "Just like I am." Through the window, they could see the clinic grounds bustling with activity. Medical students, both Eastern-educated doctors and native healers, hurried between classes. Patients recovered on the wide porches, while families found rest in the comfortable waiting areas. The Hayes Foundation Frontier Medical Center had become more than just a hospital. It was a bridge between worlds, proving that progress didn't have to destroy tradition to move forward. "Letter from Father," William said, placing it beside her book. "The Hayes Banking Board approved funding for 3 more clinics next year." Catherine smiled. "Amazing what the threat of scandal can accomplish." "Amazing what the promise of real change can accomplish," he corrected. "Even old banking empires can learn new tricks." A knock interrupted them. Mary Thompson, now one of their most promising medical students, stood in the doorway. "Dr. Morris Hayes, the Cherokee medicine woman is here for the advanced healing class, and your father-in-law's telegram just arrived. He's coming for next month's graduation ceremony. Tell them I'll be right there." Catherine gathered her teaching materials, including the new textbook. "Ready to show your father how his money's really building a legacy?" William's answer was interrupted by the arrival of their newest patient, a young man with a gunshot wound, supported by concerned friends. "Gambling dispute," one explained sheepishly. Catherine and William shared a knowing look. Some things about the frontier never changed, but now, at least, Hope had a stronger foundation. She opened her textbook to the relevant chapter, gesturing for her students to gather round. Here was the real future, not in bank vaults or society ballrooms, but in young minds learning to combine the best of all worlds. Watch closely, she instructed as William assisted her with the patient. This is how we build bridges, one person at a time. Outside, the sun rose higher over Copper Creek, glinting off the clinic's new windows and the town's rebuilt streets. The wedding quilt hung proudly in their home on the hill, a daily reminder of how beauty could rise from ashes and how love could transform not just two people, but entire worlds. Their story had become part of frontier legend. The banker, who chose love over empire, the healer, who showed him a different kind of wealth. But the real story was written in the lives they touched, the bridges they built, and the legacy they created together. It wasn't the ending anyone had expected. It was better, the end.